Good afternoon. Welcome back. It is Friday, October 6th, 2023. We've got some birthdays, we got some events. So we're going to start off. We only have a couple of really big events, or noteworthy, or whatever you want to call it, looking down the calendar. On this day in 1985 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, Cale Yarborough wins his final career Cup Series race, driving the Rainier Lundy number 28 Hardee's Ford. Wasn't a dominating win by any stretch of the imagination. It's almost more of a game of attrition. A lot of guys had problems. Dominant car that day, pole sitter Harry Gant blew an engine in the final 25% of the race after leading quite a bit of it. Excuse me. Cale held off Darrell Waltrip, Jeff Bodine, Bill Elliott, Morgan Shepherd, as they were all having strong runs that day. Also on this day, in the Busch race in 1990 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, Sterling Marlin wins his first career Busch Series win, nearly 3.5 years before he'd win his first Cup Series race, even though he had been a Cup Series driver at this point full-time for about 3 or 4 years. So let's go to birthdays. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so we'll start off on this day in 1940. He's a crew chief. Had a son that raced briefly in the Cup Series, but crew chiefing was what he was more known for. He crew chiefed Lake Speed to his first career win in 1988. I believe he was also on Cliff Stewart's team when Rusty Wallace drove there, Jeff Bodine and a few others. In this card he's pictured in, he was with Jimmy Means' team. That'd be Mr. Darrell Bryant. Of course, his son would be Kirk Bryant, who had a brief run in the Cup Series in the mid-80s. But Darrell Bryant. Then up next, born on this date in 1965, he was a journeyman Busch Series driver the early to mid-90s. Started off driving a little bit for Sam Ard's Busch team. I believe he ended up driving his own stuff briefly. Mr. Richard Lassiter. He had a couple top 10 finishes. The team just kind of struggled. Didn't have the financing. But like a lot of drivers at this time, did the best with the equipment that he had. Then up next, born on this day in 1948, friend of the channel, co-host of the Scene Vault podcast, Mr. Steve Waid. Looking dapper there with that Dayglow jacket. So there's some highlights of Mr. Wade's career up till 1990. But if you don't listen to the Scene Vault podcast, recommend you go give them a listen. They got a lot of good interviews over there, a lot of really in-depth breakdowns of different articles from the past. It's really good podcast. Comes out generally. I'm a Patreon subscriber, so they usually drop for Patreon subscribers on Monday. For everyone else, I think it's about Wednesday or Thursday. Definitely a podcast that I look forward to each week. Born on this day in 1956, standout in the modified division. Ran for a long time in the Busch Series, several wins there. I believe he only made one Cup Series start, but worked at Joe Gibbs Racing for a long time as a spotter and driver coach. Mr. Mike McLaughlin. So this was in his Busch North days. He ran in the Busch North Series, kind of in between his modified and his Cup time, or his Busch time. Then he went to C.C. Welliver's team. There you see Fiddle Faddle, replaced Todd Bodine, who moved to Cup. If you don't know what Fiddle Faddle is, it's kind of similar to like a Cracker Jack. It's a toffee-coated popcorn with peanuts. Pretty tasty. They had Royal Oak sponsorship. What I thought was funny about Royal Oak, it's about the same time that Kingsford came into the Busch Series or thereabouts. So it's always interesting to kind of see timelines of sponsorships when one company from an industry gets in. Sometimes their competitor jumps in as well. Jumped forward a little bit there. French's and Black Flag, the Reckitt and Coleman Corporation, had some of their sponsors on this car throughout the year. That was just two of them. They did run a split design one year that I don't think NASCAR really liked. Gould's Pumps was on the car for a while, and ITT Industries. There's another look at a different Gould's Pumps uniform. He went over to Gibbs. Didn't have sponsorship. They did pick up MB&A for a brief time. And then I can't even remember whose team this was. Less Care Kitchens. It's probably not going to... Oops. That may have been that Angela's Motorsports car. If you if you really, really want an interesting story, look up Angela's Motorsports. Angela Harkness is the lady that was the car owner's name, but that was not her real name, and there's a really interesting story behind it. There's a good look at the Fiddle Faddle car. There's the Royal Oak car. I think it's a pretty flashy paint job. Nicely done there. Then there's the French's car. That's not the split car I talked about. I couldn't find a picture of that one. I guess it's on the back of the card, so we're going to see that. So there's the split car. You can see how part of it's split between the French's and the Black Flag sponsorship. They had one that was more diversely painted. You can see the different brandings, but Gould's Pumps, nice looking car there. Then there's a good look at the MB&A car that he drove for Joe Gibbs. And this was probably one of my favorite Mike McLaughlin cards. When he was in Modifieds, he was nicknamed Magic Shoes. So this is just a nicely done card. I believe I actually had this one, sent this one off TTM. I've got it in my binder over here somewhere. But I always just thought that was a super cool, nicely done, and well thought out card. A lot of creativity there, Wheels High Gear. You know, something that Panini lacks, creativity. And our final birthday today, we normally don't go into football cards, but we're only going into football cards because of the strong racing connection. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, born on this day in 1930, but sadly passed away in 2010. Mr. Les Richter. So you see, this would be his rookie card in NASCAR as a NASCAR official. He was president of Riverside, then he ended up being a NASCAR official. Then he retired sometime in the 90s. I really can't remember. Well, we have an 89, 90, 91, 92, and 93 Max. So super cool there. And we do have a 1957 Topps and a 1960 Topps of Mr. Les Richter as well. So, like I said, we normally don't do football cards and other sports on the birthdays, but when they tie in directly with racing, we'll go ahead and cover them. But anyway, happy birthday to all those celebrating birthdays today. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on the way out. I really, really would appreciate it. It would help us out a little bit here on the channel. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we'll see you tomorrow.